That's very distracting. Again, I apologize. We did some run-throughs with this earlier and thought we had most of the kinks worked out. Okay, are we good? CD, can you hear us? Everything fine?
I can hear you fine on my end.
Okay, can everyone hear us? Let's do a quick roll call before we get started to make sure everybody's on and can hear. Again, Jason Taylor,
Patty Davis.
Rick Gibson, Diddy Rhodes,
Harriet Brown, Charlene Herring,
Russ Brown, Herb Rent, Randy Bright.
okay, and I think Don's, did I see her, Don Wood? Okay. Okay, well, I think we're all here. Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. Again, I'll welcome everybody, kind of keep this as brief as I can, but welcome everybody, and again, thank you for your willingness to serve on this particular commission, the Capital Project Sales Tax Commission. This is one of those things that we think is critical to the future growth of the county. And what we're hoping to accomplish with this is put a capital sales tax in place that would help fund a new sewer plant, a new wastewater facility, a treatment facility for the county. We have a lot of the kind of pieces of the puzzle in place as far as what we need to attract growth. The county is very geographically well positioned. We've got adequate water and gas and power. The one thing we really don't have is adequate wastewater, and we are quickly running out of the capacity we do have, and the plants that we have are antiquated. They're not very efficient. We have an opportunity to work with the state to help fund a large portion of a new wastewater treatment plant, but there's still a portion that we're going to have to pay. We're hoping that the capital project sales tax can be a portion of covering that cost. So that's what we're here to try to accomplish. And again, I want to thank you all for your support, your willingness to serve, and hopefully your support in helping us market and get this done. Okay, with that, I will turn it over as far as an explanation of the capital project sales tax to our attorney representing us on this, which is Mr. C.D. Rhodes. We hope to make you all the experts in this, so you'll have all the information you need to make responsible decisions and help answer questions that the public's going to have. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Jason. And I want to reiterate Jason's thanks. This is hopefully won't take up too much of your time. Everybody's time is valuable, but we certainly appreciate you being willing to devote it to this purpose. So the capital project sales tax, just as a quick, by way of explanation, state law authorizes local governments to put in place a number of different, usually 1% sales taxes to fund a variety of different types of projects, and also tax relief. So Fairfield County right now has in place the local option sales tax, which is a 1% sales tax that is applied to offset the property taxes that folks pay. The penny that we're talking about here, the capital project sales tax, is probably the most flexible capital penny that state law authorizes. The process here, the penny itself is approved at a referendum, and it has to be used, or the proceeds of that penny have to be used to fund very specific capital projects. And the determination, or that list of capital projects, is where the capital project sales tax commission comes in. There has to be a way to decide what that list of capital projects is. And the act itself doesn't, it avoids putting too much power directly in the hands at least, of the county council. So while the county council is authorized to create the commission and initiate the process of putting the capital project sales in place, the determination of that list of projects, the capital projects that are most critical to the county, is delegated to a kind of a grassroots commission of citizens. The reason they delegate it out like that is because they want to make sure that there is representation from certainly within the county itself, but also within the municipalities in the county, so they can make sure that the projects that are chosen to be funded with the proceeds of this penny are really the most important projects for the county at large, rather than just those that are deemed most important by the county council. And so that is ultimately your role in this process, is to take the information that is provided to you and come up with or approve the list of capital projects that are actually going to go on the ballot, that are going to specifically be voted on by the voters of Fairfield County, and for which the proceeds of that penny are ultimately going to be used. Of course, we hope that through this process and through learning about how this capital penny works and the importance of the project we're proposing, the wastewater treatment plant and some additional lines, that you will also be advocates for the tax. Because of some state ethics rules, it's the county and Winsboro and Ridgeway, all of these public entities that want to see this thing done are prohibited from using public resources to promote a particular result in this election, in the referendum. So, for instance, the best example of that is, Jason can't go out there and use his county phone to call up people and ask them to vote in favor of the tax. He can't use his email. He can't use his own time to get out there and advocate for folks to vote for the referendum, because Jason is a public resource. His time is a public resource. He can't use the county's copier, go out there and print up flyers and ask the people to vote for him. But you, as appointed citizens who aren't paid by the county, you're not compensated for your time, you're giving it freely, you do have the flexibility to go out there and promote it without having to worry about violating any state ethics rules. And so an important part of this process is to learn as much as you can so that you can also be a resource out in the community to help people understand why this is important. Now, the tax itself is very similar to any other sales tax in the state. It is applied essentially to the same items that the normal sales tax, the normal 5% state sales tax is applied to. It's actually applied to a fewer items than the local option sales tax. The local option sales tax applies to unprepared food, whereas the sales tax, just like the state sales tax, does not. If it is approved by the voters, it will go into effect on May 1st of 2021. According to the act, it has to go before the voters at a general election. So the upcoming general election in November is our one shot at getting this thing adopted until the following general election in 2021. So this is kind of this is not one of those things where you can just tee it up again and reintroduce it sometime in the spring. You only get one crack at this per year, and so we certainly want to make the most of the opportunity that we are given. The tax itself, one of the things that is determined by the county council and by the commission is the length of term of the tax. The maximum term is 8 years, and generally speaking, that's what counties opt for, and that's certainly what we are suggesting in this particular case. Included with the agenda that was originally emailed to you was a letter from the South Carolina Office of Fiscal Affairs. They are helpful in this process because they estimate for counties, or they provide counties with an estimate of what the collections from this sales tax are likely to be. Don't know how closely you dug into that particular letter, but they base their estimates on the county's historic collections for the local option sales tax. And then they deduct out a percentage for the unprepared food that this capital project sales tax won't be applied to. And then they also make some estimates or projections based on population growth and their expected growth of the proceeds of the tax over its at least initially 3-year term. In this particular case, I think this underscores the real need for a wastewater treatment plant and growth in Fairfield County. They recognize, they acknowledge that the county's population has effectively been stagnant in recent years. And so whereas you normally see a growth rate in those collections of about 1%, in this case, they've kept the expected growth of that tax static, at least for the first 3 years. And so they're expecting that it's going to bring in about $1.4 million a year, maybe a little bit more, with a total projection over its 8-year term of about $11.5 million, which is kind of what we thought. We figured it'd be somewhere between about 10 and 12 million based on the collections from other counties that have put this in place. One of the benefits of this tax, and one of the reasons that it really is an exceptional tool for counties to build large capital projects like a wastewater treatment plant, is that you can issue bonds based upon or secured by the proceeds of this tax. They are technically general obligation bonds of the county. So just like the bonds that the county issues that it repays through property taxes. But in this case, rather than being repaid through property taxes, or property taxes are a backstop, effectively, the bonds that are issued are sized so that they can be repaid through the proceeds of the tax without having to levy property taxes in order to repay them. That's actually the one kind of option that is left to the county council to decide. Once you have developed that list of projects, once you've presented that to county council, they get to make the decision whether to move forward with the referendum or not. So they kind of they don't have a line item veto, but they do have a veto of the entire process if they decide not to move forward. And the one thing they can add to the ballot, you've already formulated that to include the project, but the one thing they can add to it is whether or not they wish to issue bonds to finance the project. I think in this particular case, that's going to be a necessity. One of the great things about this tax is that it'll go into effect on May 1st, 2021. It'll start to be collected, and if we can build that plant and if we can start construction in 2021, that's great. Once we have a quarter or two of collections under our belt to kind of prove the collections that we expect, we can go ahead and issue bonds. But if it's 3 or 4 years until we're ready to proceed with the plant, hopefully it won't be that long, but if it is, then during that time, the proceeds from that tax are just simply collecting in an account, and the bonds that we ultimately have to issue are a lot smaller as a result. We can use those funds that have collected over the interim period of time to pay for the cost of the project up front. So it really is an excellent tool. It works really, really well, and once it's in place, it's a very flexible tool for counties to use to fund these large-scale capital projects. To give you kind of a statewide perspective, this is a tax that has been put in place it is in place right now in 23 of the state's 46 counties. I think there's another 4 or 5 that have used it in the past that don't have one in place right now. So this really is seen on a kind of a statewide basis as being an essential tool to fund capital projects. So I think I've probably spoken enough now. I think we can, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, are there any questions from anybody about how the tax works, how the process works, or any questions about your role?
I had a question about, you mentioned the sales tax exemption. This is Randy Bright. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my question was, you had mentioned that there would be sales tax exemption. I think you said prepared food, but I think you meant, or at least I understood, to be unprepared food. But will the other state sales tax exemptions be applicable, or just the groceries? And I'm particularly referencing medical purchases.
All of the normal exemptions that apply to the state sales tax also apply to the capital project sales tax.
Okay.
I bring up unfood and correct me on that because it is the one distinction really between the local option sales tax and the capital project sales tax. It also is the reason why, when you look at that letter, the collections, the projected collections for the capital project sales tax are a good bit less than the historic collections for the local option sales tax.
Okay, so they'll, like I noticed, like Richland County, theirs don't mirror the state exemption taxes, but ours will 100%?
That's correct. Yeah. So the exemptions that apply to the capital project sales tax are set by statute. They are not left up to the individual localities to determine. So even if we wanted to exempt some additional item from the capital project sales tax that's not exempted by state law, we wouldn't have that option. We're locked into using the normal state sales tax.
Okay. I just wondered, because I noticed I paid the extra 2% on food in Richland County, but as long as you, that's great. As long as it perfectly mirrors and that's the law, that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, this is Rick Gibson. I'm not going to act like I know what's going on, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I'd like to see more information concerning the whole project, my role. Is there any way for you to send me your notes from what you're referencing so that I can make an informed decision? I do know that we need to have sewer and water just to, meet a bare minimum and interest folk to come into Fairfield County. But I'd like to be just a little bit more informed before we sort of, push off from the shore. Is there any way that you can provide me with any additional information or point me to a resource that I might be able to sort of halfway glean? When you're talking about percentage points and things of that nature, I just want to make sure that I'm telling folk the right thing.
The CD, if I may, I will be glad to meet. One of the things we're going to do, and we're developing, and CD has kind of started and sent me the bones of that, and I've got Chris Clausen and Ty Davenport also working on it, is we're going to have a fact sheet for you all trying to explain any and all aspects of this, the penny sales tax, the sewer plan itself, all of these different things that we're looking at. But I'd be glad, Rick or anyone else, to meet with you individually and to go over this and answer any questions you've got.
All right, one other caveat that I might have is that something was said about if we don't move forward, then the money that we raise would be pooled. And that pool of money, if we don't enact within a certain period of time, of course, it will accumulate. If it's vetoed, then what happens to the fund?
So, sure, let me talk a little bit about how that process works. There are a number of different kind of branches a little bit. There's a number of different ways it can go. But once the ballot itself, and before our next meeting, I'll have a proposed ballot prepared for you to review. But the ballot itself is very simple, and it simply says that, shall a 1% sales and use tax be imposed within the county for a period of 8 years, up to 8 years, to fund these specific projects. And then it just simply lists out the projects. And what we're proposing, project 1 would be the plant itself, and then project 2 would be collecting lines. And then there's also an estimate of the amount of the proceeds of the tax that would be devoted to that particular purpose. So when the voters vote on a capital project sales tax, they're voting to impose that 1% tax to fund those specific projects. And that is an important aspect of the whole kind of scheme here, is that it's not left up to the county council to just simply make decisions going forward as to how that money is going to be spent. It has to be spent on projects that are approved by the voters. Now, the tax goes in place on May 1st, 2021, regardless of where we are at that point in time in planning for the construction of the plant, and the tax is collected. But if county council came in the next year and said, gosh, we really need a new fire station out in the Jenkinsville area, they couldn't just adopt an ordinance and decide to spend that money on a fire station instead of a wastewater treatment plant. Now, there is one exception to that rule. And there's some language on the ballot generally that reaffirms this. But obviously, circumstances change over time. And 8 years is a long time for the tax to be in place. And circumstances could possibly change during that 8 years that might, number one, make the use of those proceeds on the plant a true legal impossibility. One example of that we recently dealt with down in Georgetown County. They had a capital project sales tax that they had put in place, and one of the projects on that list was $6 million to pay a portion of about $30 million to dredge the harbor, with the Winyah Bay Harbor. And the remaining $24 million was to be put up by the federal government. Well, the federal government came in a couple of years after the tax was put in place and said, guys, your port here is viable. This is not a project that we are willing to fund because we don't see the importance of paying for the dredging of a port that we don't find to be viable. And so we're not going to give you $24 million to fund this plant. We are taking this off of our project. So at that point in time, it puts county council in a tough spot. They have $6 million that's going to be collected over the 8-year term of the tax, and they don't have any way to spend it. So the determination has been made by DOR, with advice from DOR, that you can, if you have adequate findings, declare that a project is impossible, and then the act says that if there are excess proceeds, once all of the other projects that were included on the ballot have been paid for, that the county council can then make a determination to spend those funds on any other project that would be authorized under the act. So there certainly is, within the realm of possibility, there is the possibility that, let's say, for instance, rather than the state providing $25 million towards the cost of the plant, they had to pay for the whole thing. Well, now we don't have to use this $11 million to pay for the plant. We can use this $11 million to pay for other things. And so there are certain scenarios that could arise, although I think in this case the likelihood of them arising is slight, where it could be used for other purposes. But by and large, the purpose of the tax is to pay for specific capital projects And unless those projects are found to be impossible, then that is how the proceeds will be used.
Okay, I'd like to bounce off of Rick as well as direct this to CD and Jason regarding the fact sheet. I was just thinking as we sit here, CD, you've probably gone through this several times or whatever, maybe you, Jason. It would be good when you include that fact sheet to list possible questions that we're going to get from the public, so that we don't have to hem-hawing around. We can be able to answer it and answer it competently as whatever.
Frequently asked questions
Yeah,
section.
and one other thing, the oversight. Are we charged with the oversight, or is that entirely left up to the county council? And that's sort of like creating a fund, and for some reason they may say, well, we don't have the ability to move forward. Well, it's already been on the ballot. People have voted for it. And now we're in a quandary, whereas that money is going to be used. How much oversight does this commission have, and what's the longevity of it?
So the commission's role is to determine the projects that are going to be on the ballot and formulate the ballot itself. And once that is done, then the commission is generally disbanded, and your role kind of ceases at that point in time once county council has moved forward and the referendum is approved. So you don't really have any oversight role, but there is oversight. So first and foremost, there's always the oversight of the folks who reside within the county. There's oversight of the ballot box, as there is with any action of county council. There's also judicial oversight. So in the event that the county council chooses to spend this money, attempts to spend this money in a way that is outside of the bounds of the act, then they would be violating the law, and they'd be subject to a lawsuit to prevent them from doing that. Obviously, the last thing you want to hear is, well, gosh, if county council does something you don't like, you can sue them. So there is additional oversight that's out there. And I think Randy brought up Richland County. Richland County has been the poster child for kind of playing fast and loose with some of the provisions of not the Capital Project Sales Tax Act, but the Transportation Sales Tax Act. And through a lot of the litigation that ensued, that I'm sure you read about in the state newspaper, it was made very clear that the Department of Revenue does have an oversight role in how these taxes are used. And that's precisely the oversight role that they elected to use in the Richland County example. So as this tax is collected, of course, it's collected along with all of the other sales tax revenue that's collected by the county. It's all collected by DOR. And DOR then remits those taxes out to the county. And because they have that role of collecting the tax and then paying it over to the counties, the courts have said that they also have an oversight role as well. So the Capital Project Sales Tax Commission does not have an ongoing oversight role. There are a number of different kind of avenues for oversight that do exist.
Is that something that we might
Could the
implement?
council appoint a board after we're disbanded for oversight, like they do with the other entities, county entities throughout the county?
So I
The
think,
reason I'm asking is that I don't want this to be something like the failed VC Summer project where, all the money is in, and not saying that anybody on county council or connected with this thing is, looking to line their pockets, but I want to be in some type of an assurance, and I have the highest degree of respect for everybody that's on the county council. But sometimes things happen. I just want to be in a position whereas what we do will come to fruition and people will look at this and bless it because we all know that we need to move forward.
I think that really speaks also to Harriet's point about there's going to be a lot of questions, and if the county could appoint a board for local oversight, if that's legal, then that would be a big plus in selling the project.
Or at least some type of committee that once we start spending the funds that it is explained to this committee or a committee, and not that they would have the ability to stop it, but at least make it somewhat notable before the ship sinks.
Does CD, does the committee have to be disbanded? Can it continue and serve in some type of, that we would report back to kind of role?
Yeah, I think if the county council wanted to go that route of having kind of a citizens oversight committee or advisory committee, I think that is an absolutely fine thing to do. I wouldn't leave the capital project sales tax committee in place. The people who serve on that committee are officers under state law, as we've discussed. And so you want to kind of free those folks up to serve in other capacities if they so desire. But an advisory committee is not composed of officers, and county council can create those at will. So if county council, I wouldn't keep this kind of statutory committee in place, a committee that's created under state law. But if I wanted to transition folks over to a new advisory committee, that would be a perfectly fine thing for them to do. I think
that should be included in the plans.
But you could create something that is analogous to it.
Okay, I'm gonna be quiet and let y'all go.
No, that's a great question, man. That is, ultimately it's up to county council to make those kinds of decisions, but it is something that legally can certainly be accommodated.
Well, thank you. You've answered a few questions that I might have with regards to that.
Sure. So are there any other questions before we move on to the next agenda item? These are all great.
Well, just what is the time frame of getting us the fact sheet? What is the expectations for that?
We'll work on that and try to get that done, and by the beginning of next week, I'll shoot for that.
Okay, yeah, because obviously we'll need that. I mean, but will that give you time to give us solid estimates and a location for the facility?
I envision this fact sheet starting and growing and having additional information, and you all continually being updated. But it'll be the start, the core. Again, a lot of what CD has already prepared, and we will add to that just the process initially, because there's a process, and I'll have Chris Clausen talk about that some as far as what we have to do to get a wastewater treatment plant approved. Again, even if we had the funding, there's some other things that we have to do to get this thing approved from the engineering and legal perspective, or permitting perspective, I should say. But this fact sheet will continue to grow, but it'll be the initial process at least.
Okay, then we'll target that to have it complete by the time we start to sell the referendum?
I would think so, yes. We are closing in.
Okay.
We're negotiating a property purchase right now, in the middle of that at the moment.
Well, giving it some time will give us, again, going back to Harriet's question, give us an opportunity to look at the fact sheet and then say we need more.
Right. Again, and as y'all ask questions and y'all have questions from the public that we didn't anticipate, we will add to this thing. It will grow.
Yeah. That's good.
I have a
Thanks.
question that
kind of go, this is Harriet. Can we have, is it legal to have meetings scheduled at different locations around the county to answer questions?
I think that would be a good idea myself. I mean, I can't campaign, but I think I can, CD, go out and answer questions and educate, can't I? Ty, myself, and Chris.
That's correct. So the county officials, county staff can provide factual information. They can provide educational materials. And so the way that these often will, you'll generally have kind of two pieces of information. If there's a Chamber of Commerce or some other group that is not funded by public resources, they will often have pulled together more of the advocacy piece, brochure, so to speak, that they can distribute. But the county itself will generally have an educational fact sheet that can be made publicly available, and certainly Jason and Chris and Ty and all the other county folks can get out there and use their time and use public resources to provide the public with factual information. Of course, getting out there and actually holding public meetings in this strange time that we're in is particularly difficult. So I think we may have to be creative about how we do forums in order to make sure that we're engaging as many people in the populace as we possibly can. My experience in having worked on lots and lots and lots of different referendums for different purposes, bond referendums and millage referendums and everything else, is that if you are not being transparent, if you're not engaging the public, then someone out there is going to suss you out, and they are going to lambaste you on Facebook and make your life miserable. And so there is no hiding in this day and age. Being transparent and having lots and lots of public engagement is really just an absolute necessity if you're going to be successful in one of these initiatives. So certainly the more ways that we can get out there and engage the public, the better off we're going to be.
This is Russ
Can
Brown.
the county-
Hello?
Can the county set up a Facebook page for us when we are ready to start rolling with this to help disseminate the information and also take feedback and questions?
There's no reason from my end you couldn't do that.
I've been involved with different zoning, property rezones over the years, and one thing, I think it's important to be transparent, but at the same time, I think it's also important to be putting yourself in a controlled environment. You said be careful about everything. I definitely agree. You got to be transparent and educate the general public on what's going on, but at the same time, you don't want to set yourself up for controversy. So I think it would be, in our best interest to be careful with those plans going forward, and make sure we try to calculate some of the risks that would be associated with when and where they are.
I think that goes back to, like it was mentioned earlier, anticipating some of the questions that might be asked and going ahead and having the answers to those as much as
That's right.
possible.
All right. Any other questions that are hanging out there?
What's that?
Any other questions that are hanging out there before we move on? So, hearing none, we'll move on to the third item on the agenda. So this is as I said, we're operating under an act here that tells us exactly how a number of processes that deal with this capital project sales tax are to be done. And as I mentioned, the act tries to ensure that you have representation both from the county council itself, or that's appointed by the county council, and also by the municipalities within the county. It tries to divide up the municipal appointments based upon the the relative populations of the municipalities in the county. And so the greater the population of a municipality, the more appointees it has. Of course, there's only 3, so you can only slice it so thin. In this particular case, the Act lays out a very specific formula that you have to follow to determine how those appointments are made or what municipalities have the right to make appointments. And in this particular case, under that formula, the only municipality who had a large enough population to be allowed to make its own appointments was Winsboro, which was allowed to make 2 appointments, Herb and Russ. And keep in mind, this is prescribed by statute. We don't have any flexibility here, so we can't just kind of ignore what the statute tells us to do. Of course, there's a 6th member there that still needs to be filled, and what the Act requires, or what it provides, is that the other municipal appointees, in this case Herb and Russ, must themselves appoint the 6th member, who must be a resident of one of the other municipalities in the county who has not yet appointed anybody. And so in this case, I think the obvious solution was to appoint someone from Ridgeway, being the 2nd largest municipality in the county by a pretty stiff margin. And through lots of discussions, that Ridgeway appointee has been proposed to be Ms. Herring. So the next item on our agenda, if Herb and Russ will do us the honors, is for them to vote to appoint Ms. Herring as our 6th member. Are there any questions? I recognize that it's kind of a weird way of going about filling out your commission, but it's what the statute requires of us. Are there any questions about that before we have that vote?
I think it points out a good reason why the selection process is an excellent reason why that the people that are on this commission shouldn't stay on it once the action or inaction takes place at the election time. In other words, the normal board appointment procedure should be followed for any oversight committee after that.
I think you are 100% correct. So if there are no questions, if I could maybe have Herb and Russ, I don't think we need to go through any sort of overly formulaic procedure here. I think Ms. Herring's name has been nominated. If we can get you, the 2 of you, to maybe state your name and register your vote either in favor of her or against, then I think we can dispense with.
Sure. This is Russ Brown. I'm in favor of Charlene Herring. I don't know if Herb's here.
Herb's here. He's still on. He may be muted.
Hey, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can. Off the moment there, Herb. We were wondering if you were having second thoughts.
Yeah, I approve of Ms. Herring being on our commission. Very much so. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that done, thank you all for voting. Ms. Herring, thank you for being willing to serve. We'll move on to our 4th agenda item, which is the election of our chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. Of course, the chairman is our presiding officer. I think Jason and I have kind of been serving in that role for lack of a chairman so far. But the vice chairman, in case the chairman is not able to serve in that role, would assume it. And then ultimately, the commission will adopt a resolution that approves the form of the ballot, which will include the list of projects, and we'll need, at the very least, a secretary to attest to that resolution. So I think we should flesh out all 3 of those positions. I don't have any suggestions as to who should serve in what role, and unless Jason does, perhaps somebody can just maybe nominate a chairman first, a vice chairman second, and then a secretary, and perhaps we can just vote on the whole slate unless anyone has any objections or alternative suggestions.
I make a motion, we nominate Mr. Herb Rentz as chairman. This is Rick Gibson making that nomination.
I'm listening to you, Rick Gibson.
All right, are there any other nominations for chairman? All right, do we have a nomination for vice chairman?
I make a motion, we nominate Ms. Charlene Herring as vice chairman.
All right, any others? All right, and our secretary?
I nominate Ms. Patty Davis.
I think we need a member of the commission to serve as the secretary. Okay. Turnabout's fair play here. I think if somebody were to nominate, Rick's been doing a lot of nominating.
All right, good point.
Yeah, I'll nominate Rick for secretary.
Nominate who?
Rick.
Rick,
Perfect.
Oh, I
For secretary.
decline. I decline.
Compulsory service around here.
I wish I had some other names. I'd surely nominate them, but those are the only ones that I recognize. Is there any way that we could get a list of who all is
Well, Patty,
available? I know you said that.
you ought to read it. We'll read the list.
I'll solve the issue, if I might. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I'll nominate Russ Brown for the secretary.
I'd really like to decline that position if that would be okay.
Okay?
Thank you, though, Herb.
Who do we have left, Patty?
Okay.
We have left,
So
we have left Harriet Brown, Mr. Bright. That's it.
So it's Harriet Brown and Mr. Bright.
I'm making
Either one of those, yeah.
Who wants it?
Miss Harriet Brown.
would you raise your hand?
I nominate Miss Harriet.
I would like the particularly arduous role. Any other nominations? Patty, will you give us our slate of officers?
Yes, chairman, we have Herb Rentz, vice chairman, Charlene Herring, and secretary, Harriet Brown.
Perfect. So for voting purposes, folks, let's vote one at a time. Say your name and yay or nay. Why don't we do it? Roll call voting. Rick Gibson,
Yay.
Randy Bright,
yay.
Harriet Brown,
Yay.
Herb Rentz,
I guess I'll just say yay.
Russ Brown,
Yay.
and Charlene Herring.
Yay.
Perfect.
Okay, we have our officers.
We have our officers. Thank y'all. We really appreciate it. So the next item on our agenda is a more in-depth discussion of the proposed project. Jason, what did you have in mind for that agenda item?
Well, I can just essentially kind of go over. I do have, again, Ty Davenport, our Economic Development Director, and Chris Clausen, our Community Development Director, in here to join me in this explanation. But I can just kind of kick it off on why we chose a wastewater treatment facility, why that's the project the county would like to put forward, and then kind of outline that project. That works?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and get started. A sewer plant is essentially a means to an end, and that end is a better quality of life for our citizens, economic opportunity for our citizens. And as CD mentioned earlier, the county has faced a situation where we have a declining population. We've got to do something to turn around that and make Fairfield County more vital and sustainable economically. And the piece of the puzzle that's missing, again, is wastewater. Our utilities, for the most part, are in good shape. The town of Winsboro has done a great job in getting new water capacity for the county. We have, again, gas, we have power. We're well situated with our roads and our location between Columbia and Charlotte. But one of the pieces of the puzzle that's just missing is wastewater. Ridgeway has an old facility that is not expandable. Winsboro has an older facility also, which is reaching the end of its life as far as its capacity is about used up. So we have to do something to address wastewater capacity. The state, this would not be possible, I don't think, without the partnership of the state and, frankly, all of us coming together as partners, town of Ridgeway, town of Winsboro, everyone coming together. But the state has invested heavily in the county in purchasing what they call the mega site, which is referred to as the mega site, the 1,200 acres along I-77. The state realizes for that mega site to be viable as an industrial site, it has to have all the necessary utilities, again, sewer being the one missing. So the state has stepped up and has committed to helping us find the resources to fund this facility. And a wastewater treatment plant cost in the neighborhood of $35 million is what we're anticipating. So again, I don't think this is something that we could accomplish on our own. Back when we thought we were going to get 2 new nuclear reactors, it would have been a relatively easy lift for us. But again, without reaching out and having the partnership of the state, this would be a very tough thing to accomplish. But the state has said that they would put some money in, but we still are left with a considerable amount that the county has to come up with. We've looked at a number of different revenue streams to fund this, and one of those is this penny sales tax. So again, that's why we appreciate you all's service. To the end of trying to get this, and I don't want to go way off of, but we will talk about also the joint system that comes into play, and CD with that, you know, we've got the county council and we have this joint system also, which is a separate legal body. How does that, that's something I do need to ask, how does that come into play with this? County council's making decisions and the funding would go to the Joint Water and Sewer Authority? I don't mean to confuse you, but that's something I think everybody needs to understand
pretty
also.
Common situation where the project sponsor itself, the entity that's actually going to carry out the project, is not the county. These taxes are used to fund projects for cities, for special purpose districts, or even for nonprofits that are providing true public services. So absolutely, that's how it would work. When it gets to the point where we're ready to either issue bonds or just pay the funds over to actually carry out the project, there's a kind of requisition process that's used, and that money is transferred over to the joint system to actually pay the project costs. There's a little bit of county oversight there, obviously. I think that's probably, municipality and you have a real true independent entity, that oversight process is pretty important. In this case, the joint system is, the county is certainly very much involved in that. And so I think the oversight's probably not going to be a huge concern.
But the Joint Water and Sewer Authority system was set up, again, at much of the request of the state. The state said that they want to fund this thing, but they didn't want us to set up a separate authority to oversee and run the sewer plant. And that authority is composed of members of the county and the towns right now, primarily county and Winsboro, and we're trying to bring on Ridgeway also. But anyway, that's a component of this. What we're looking to construct is what's called an MBR, a membrane bioreactor. That is that's environmentally the cleanest treatment process that is available today. We would want to be environmentally friendly because we do realize that where we would be putting the treated effluent could affect people, and we don't want it to negatively affect people. There's more of a perception, I think, there than there is a reality, because the water that we would be putting out would be cleaner than the accepting body. And at this point, it appears that Cedar Creek would be the body that would accept the treated effluent. But again, the MBR treats it to a level that the quality of the water going into the creek is much higher than the quality of the water in the creek currently. That's one of the things, again, that I think many people are aware that we have had some resistance there. But the county is very limited in where it can discharge, and a discharge point is critical for a wastewater treatment facility. The ideal place to discharge is into the Broad River, but if we build a plant there, the cost goes up almost double. So we do have to keep that in mind, and strategically placing it along 77 also has the benefit of opening up potential development areas. It makes those areas a lot more cost effective for a developer to come in and build. And then we need to keep that in mind, because once we build this facility, the purpose of it is to create growth, and we also need customers on this system to help pay the bills to operate this treatment facility. It would be, again, I don't know if I mentioned, it would be for 2 million gallons. It would initially be built to treat 2 million gallons of wastewater, and it would be easily expandable up to 4 should that be needed. And I will, at this point, Chris Clausen, I will let him talk a little bit more about the permitting, because this is another aspect of it that while we're looking to get the funding done and the engineering done, there's also a permitting side of it, and that is somewhat out of our control as far as it has to go before what's called the Council of Governments, the COG, Central Midlands. Chris, if you would like to discuss the 208 clean water process, and I know this is getting into a lot of details, and we will have all this at some point compiled on a fact sheet, but again, just to go ahead and give you all a little bit of an understanding of the permitting process above and beyond the legal and the engineering and the funding process. Chris?
Is this good social distance? Are we good?
I'll move for you. I'll
You move? No. All
You
right.
get to the microphone also.
Okay. All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Chris Clausen, Community Development Director. So the permitting process is a little more complicated. In the 60s, the state set it up this way that you have regional planning bodies. In our case, we adhere to the Central Midlands Councils of Government for 208 planning, which is the water quality. And they have a group, it's the EPAC committee, it's the Environmental Planning Advisory Committee, that is comprised of a number of the actual treatment operators, the different towns, special purpose districts, etc., who are providing wastewater services, and then also representatives that are chosen by the different counties, municipalities, etc., and a number of other special purpose type of groups, so like the League of Women Voters, etc., who come out. And so there's that group is the technical committee, and they look at all the specs on what the plan is going to do, and really they analyze that, and making sure that the effluent that is out and that the water body receiving can actually receive it. So it's just an additional layer to DHEC, and DHEC, they'll look at the real, they'll really get into the weeds, and they'll look at all the numbers, and then, but they need that EPAC committee and then the COG board itself to sign off on it prior to DHEC releasing a permit to construct the wastewater facility. So we are still in the early phases. Again, we're still trying to nail down an exact location, and with that, then the exact numbers that we have will be finalized, and then we'll go to that EPAC committee. It looks like we'll probably have to do 2 meetings with them just to explain the whole process, because at the same time we're creating a new entity, and we have to give territory, a service district to that entity. So we're going through that process, and then it'll go to the COG board for approval, and then from there it'll go to DHEC for that final, if you will, like number crunching, and they'll do their own public outreach component to it as well. So, do you have anything to add, CD?
I do not. I think it was good summary.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Just again, we do have Ty Davenport, our Economic Development Director here, and just again, I can't emphasize enough, this is all about economic opportunity and being able to share and some of the growth that we should be able to share with that's pressing up from Northeast Richland. But I will let Ty talk a little bit about the critical need for this, because again, we've had a good year with economic development, but we're to the point we have no more product left to sell unless we develop more product. Ty, if you would kind of address that.
Sure. Just to get right down to it, in our industrial property out at the Fairfield Commerce Center and Walter B. Brown Park, where the primary places where we're trying to recruit industry, we have about 34,000 gallons per day of sewer capacity, which is that's minimal. That's, it sounds like a lot, but it's not. And for instance, we've got a project right now that we're one of 5, and we feel very competitive, but they're going to use 30,000 gallons per day. So that will leave us with 4,000 gallons per day of capacity, which is basically zero. So if we do not expand this facility, we do not expand our capacity in the county, economic development stops. And then then if you lose a company, we're going backwards. So this is what the work we're doing here is critical to the future of this county. There really is nothing more important right now to the long-term success of this county and the people who live here. Another component is, and I think Jason already touched on it, is the housing piece. We cannot grow. We can't build a residential neighborhood in the county because there's no municipal. It would be difficult to get sewer service. So we need to, for instance, if we're going to grow between Blythewood and Ridgeway, say, there's no way that they can be served with sewer. So the folks that are working in the county, they're going to have to live outside the county, and that's not our goal either. We want good housing stock and good places to live, and growth for merchants and so forth.
I think that covers essentially why we're trying to do it and what we're trying to do. Any questions on that?
Hey, Jason, I was wondering if Ty could expand a little bit on the 34,000 gallons of capacity.
Sure.
Because it's not all of Winsboro's plant capacity, but it's got to do with the line. And I just want to make sure that if the commission's asked a question about that, they understand that distinction.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that clarification there. So CD's correct. The town of Winsboro's system, I believe I'm close here, they've got about 250,000 gallons per day of excess capacity. The issue with the industrial properties is those properties are out on I-77, 10 miles away from 11 miles away from the sewer or the wastewater treatment plant. The collection line that runs along 34 from the industrial parks back to town is very old. And it's too small, and the pump stations are not sized to pump any more effluent than they already do. So the collection line is the bottleneck to that 250,000 gallons per day. Now we could replace that collection line at a cost of $10 million, but we add no capacity. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And additionally, 250,000 gallons per day of capacity is not a lot of capacity either.
Spending $10 million to acquire that and with an antiquated plant.
Yeah.
And it's not smart either.
So then we'd be at capacity in Winsboro. So there's really no, economically it doesn't make sense to do that. We have to build the new plant. But if full disclosure, if somebody says how much capacity is there at the Winsboro plant, there's 250,000 gallons a day roughly. You just can't access it.
Perfect. Dang, I just wanted to make sure that they were aware of that distinction in case somebody asked a question. So Are there any questions for Ty or Chris or Jason about the plan itself? And I don't assume this is the last time we're going to discuss this. This is an ongoing process, and we want you to be really well informed. But if there are any questions that you've got right now, we can certainly field them.
Obviously, we just need more details.
Absolutely.
And I guess those are forthcoming.
I think so.
All right. So we'll move on. The next item on our agenda is a quick discussion of the schedule. So, the kind of the final piece of work product from this commission will be a resolution that adopts the form of the ballot and the list of the projects. Where we go from there, that goes on to the county council. County council then enacts an ordinance that approves the form of the ballot and the projects, and also makes a determination of the kind of the priority of funding of the projects, and whether or not we're going to issue bonds to pay for it. That ordinance has to be enacted by noon on August the 15th. So that's kind of our drop dead date to get everything done. Under I think a normal county meeting schedule, I think we should probably, and Patty, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but probably makes sense to have all of our work done sometime in early June, and that should give us plenty of time to get 3 readings through county council between mid-June and August the 15th. Is that correct?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So we will certainly have at least one more meeting. I think we'll almost certainly have more than that. And so I will work with Jason and with Patty to maybe come up with a tentative schedule of dates for additional meetings and a schedule for, or that kind of contemplates our last meeting and the date that work needs to be done by. And then we can get all of this to county council and let them move forward with their work. So I've got an item on here, just any kind of lingering questions on the commission as far as anything you've heard today before we adjourn?
Just, now, where, as we collect the funds, I assume they'll be held just like the lost sales tax funds are being held. But what will we do to ensure that they're reported on a more timely basis than our lost funds are?
Do you, when you say reported, what do you mean?
Well, so that the public can see the collection at least every quarter. Right now, our lost sales tax have not been updated since late 2018 for online viewing on the county website.
Jason, I think that's for you and your team.
Again, that's something I'll have to look at to make sure that we can try to report that in real time as much as much as we can. But now these funds have to be held separately, CD. How?
That's correct.
So I mean, it couldn't be commingled.
That's right. They're reported over to they are transferred over to the county on a quarterly basis once the collections begin, and they do have to be separately.
Well, that should be reasonably easy to post.
There's, some counties, take a look at Florence County, Sumter County, I know has one, Orangeburg, I believe has one, where they have a separate page where they report the collections, and they also report progress on projects. Of course, that is a kind of a more detailed process when you have 40
Multiple
or
projects, yeah.
like somebody like Florence. But that's an option as well.
Okay.
Any other lingering questions?
One of the reasons I brought that up, just for general accounting purposes, is a few years ago, long before this current regime was in place, there was a big brouhaha in the county about about the lost sales tax itself not being reported accurately, and that's still in people's minds. So we just need to be sure it's cleaned up before we start presenting this.
Good point. Let's see.
Also, I might would like to find out, if I could, what are the proposed sites and where are we with them?
As soon as we get out of contract.
Yeah, we'll have it under contract very shortly. We're batting back and forth with a per acre price and a few other little details, but we do hope to release that very, very shortly. But again, we're in the middle of negotiations at this point. But we've looked at a number of sites, and we do have it narrowed down to what we feel is the best site.
We can't know that up front, or is that something that we'll have to wait and see?
Ty, what kind of time frame we on?
Our lawyer's drawing up a contract now, so it'll go back and forth 2, 3, 4 times. You know how land sales are, but it's a significant cost and a significant land buy. It's not like buying an acre next door, so it'll take a little time. I mean, I think we should have it done in 3 weeks, but like I said, they're going to get a contract, say Friday, the seller, and it'll kick back and forth. Until we get
So we can't find out who the seller is?
No.
Can we know who the seller is?
No.
And because we got a
I mean,
backup
that's going to
site.
come out eventually.
Oh, it will, certainly.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we got a backup site, and we don't. It doesn't need to be. It's just negotiations. It needs
Yeah.
It's just.
Our fear is, again, it can drive cost up for us and cause other problems.
Yeah.
We really need to get it nailed down
Yeah.
first.
I mean, I
I
will say
would
this.
assume there's an NDA on it anyway, so you couldn't tell us.
The last, I mean, just to give you an idea, the last site that we had under contract that we chose to drop was the property on Syrup Mill Road, basically at the bridge over Big Cedar Creek and Syrup Mill Road. It was right there. That's not the property we're going for. We found 2 pieces we like better, but that gives you a general idea of where it is.
Again, the property has to be located on a body of water, a creek or a river that can accept the effluent. And we have identified Cedar Creek.
Right. Yeah. Well, one other question. I'm having a senior moment. I guess I'll catch it next meeting.
Well, again, everybody need to get my phone number out to everybody, Ty's and mine and Chris's, and don't hesitate to call us at any time if you have a question.
Yeah, we can start having one-on-one.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to have one-on-one meetings if possible with everyone.
Next Monday, yeah. We need to generate a list of frequently asked
Yes,
questions.
we do.
And that some of those questions will come from you, not from us. We'll think of everything we can, but you'll come up with different things.
Oh, yeah, one other question that I have. The purchase of the property is not contingent upon the sales tax that we're trying to generate now, right?
It would be nice if we could have all these pieces in. It'd be great if we could have all these pieces in place ahead of the purchase. I don't see how we can do that. I think it's somewhat of a gamble that we have to.
Have the property control.
Right, yeah, because again, it's tied, Ryan, to me, we have to have the property under control before we can finish the preliminary engineering report and get our permits from DHEC. So, a lot of different, again, moving parts and pieces of this puzzle kind of pull together.
Any other questions out there?
Just one other suggestion. Give us a few days to digest the fact sheet that you send out before our next meeting, and then we can respond with any more questions that you could add to the sheet to be answered before that next meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely. So speaking of next meeting, I don't know that we're necessarily ready to set a specific date for the next meeting, but any kind of general you can give us for days that would probably days at or particular times that would be bad for folks for meeting purposes.
I'll speak up if nobody else is. My name's Harriet. In general, Wednesdays just are not a good day, but I can make them work.
Okay.
Great, bright, flexible, any day, any time.
I missed that. I think that was Randy who spoke, but I couldn't understand it.
Yeah, I'm flexible.
Okay. All right, well, we'll keep those in mind.
This is Herb. I'm fairly flexible also. Yeah, and doctor's appointments can be moved. Did y'all hear that?
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else from your end?
I'm good.
Anything we missed?
Patty?
I think we're good.
All right. Well, I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so moved.
Second.
Still kind of serving as chairman here. Can we get a second?
I think you got a second.
You got a
Second.
It's all in favor.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. That sounds sufficient to me.
Yeah.
Thank y'all for your time. We really appreciate it.